where we try to solve the world's problems one drink at a time. Each week in this podcast, the topics of today and tomorrow are discussed while we sample some of the finest libations known to man. Join us. We are your hosts, Brian and Britt.
Check us out. All right, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Yes, we got some guests today.
Yeah, two new
Thanks
guys
for the
in the show.
invitation.
We got Ray over here.
Yep.
Can we get a what's up for my man Ray and Andrew over here?
Yep.
Yes, glad to meet you.
Both regulars at Casual Pint.
Yes.
One a little more acclaimed. Not to discount you at all, Andrew,
problem.
but we do have the famous Ray from Casual Pint, and if
Got
he's
his
never
name
been
on a
there,
chair.
literally a name on a chair. So you're like Norm from Cheers, man. So the Norm of Casual Pint is amongst us. This is awesome.
Now that you mention it, I'll have to tell my wife not to watch this podcast.
It's not just because you're there too much, right? It's just you're there, just enough to warrant awesomeness. That's what we're gonna go with. So welcome to Drink Talk. Today is Veterans Day 2018, and we're gonna be talking on all things veteran. We've got plenty of topics to go through. And we'll do some good. We'll do some bad.
Well, and I hear the thing to say instead of thank you for your service is I will remember or
we'll never forget.
We'll never
Never
forget.
forget.
Exactly. Yep. That's what you should be saying instead of
I was actually talking
thank
to
you. Well, I mean, say thank you, please.
Right, yeah. I was talking to my daughters today. I was taking them to rehearsal there in the Christmas Carol. And we had a nice conversation about Veterans Day and all that. And they were saying, oh, I know what to say to a veteran when we see him. And thank you for your service. I said, you can also say, we will never forget. And they were like, forget what? I said, well, lots of things. We will never forget your sacrifice. We will never forget your bravery. We will never forget September 11th. We will never forget the ones that didn't make it home. There's a lot of things that we will not forget. And if you're a veteran, you know all those things. So they thought that was really cool. So I think they'll probably start using that a little more.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah. So today's drinks, actually.
We kind of got a pregame already going.
We do.
here.
We
Yes.
do. Yep. So
What was this one? The Snow
Beast from
Snow Beast.
Kinkaider.
Kinkaider.
Yes.
Yeah. This is kind of I like the way you described it. You said it was a dessert beer, and then I added it's a fall dessert beer. It's kind of the way it tastes.
Right.
There's hints.
Reminds
of
me of
cinnamon.
a Christmas beer.
Yeah.
That's how many people would consider this. But I think this is one of those beers that fits right with the season on there for, you've already had your meal and you're ready to go watch a show or something. This is the beer you want to have.
Yeah. You're sitting by the fireplace.
Yeah, sitting by the fireplace, finishing a book, or whatever the case may be. Kinkaider's a really good brewer, too, on this. They do some really good beers.
Absolutely. Hints of cinnamon, vanilla. It's kind of got a little bit of haze to it. That's not exactly overly clear. Kind of a brown ale.
Yeah. I was thirsty.
Yeah. You really liked it. So.
I mean, I've been working all day today. I need a beer.
You need this. All right, so we'll get into the first beer from our sponsor here, but we'll get into the topic a little bit. Veterans Day, and now, either of you veterans?
I'm not a veteran.
I'm a veteran.
Veteran.
11 years Air Force.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
I was in the Air Weather Service.
A little closer to the mic there.
I was in the Air Weather Service as a military officer for 11 years, held 2 commands, and finally wound up here at, it was back then Air Force Global Weather Central, and decided that it was time to move on. So
Did you do any overseas service, or was it all stateside?
I was stationed in 2 places in Germany. Well, my first command was there. I was stationed at a place called Illesheim near Stuttgart. Not Stuttgart. I'm sorry. First one's near Stuttgart. The second one was near Munich. And at Illesheim, it was back in the mid 1980s, and that was when the first deployment of the first generation of the Apache attack helicopters came in from Fort Hood, Texas. Now, it's quite a challenge. I was a weather guy working with the 7th Corps Army unit, because under the agreement when the Air Force and the Army became separate branches after the Second World War. One of the agreements was that we would provide the weather expertise to support all Army operations, both ground and air. And so a lot of the weather guys spend at least half, if not more, of their career with Army units. They don't spend a lot. Some lot may go most of their career not spending their time on an Air Force base. So I was stationed with them, and it was kind of a challenge because most of those Army pilots or Army aviators have never seen a tree before while flying an Apache, because if you ever been to Fort Hood, there's no trees.
Yeah. Sure.
It's
What are these obstacles that we have to go around?
So they really had to learn how to fly between trees. We watched them we watched them out there and literally put them on a road, and that was a tree-lined road, and they took turns going around right about maybe about 2 or 3 feet, literally 2 or 3 feet off.
How many helicopters they go through?
Squadron is, I believe, 5 or 10. So
they destroyed 5 helicopters?
No. They would parade them through the
Gotcha.
trees. Yeah, they paraded them through
You know
the
what I'm
trees.
saying, though.
Yeah.
You hit a tree with one of those babies.
Well, yeah, you do, but they do have little extensions on the end of those rotors that will help you chop the tree first before that. And the other thing it'll do is they can also cut through like a high tension cable too.
Sure.
If they had to, but if you hit too many times, you're gonna wind up on the ground.
I saw this video just the other day. This helicopter was on the ground. Rotors were spinning. This other helicopter was coming in, and he was gonna park next to it, but he got just a little bit too close.
Pop, pop, pop.
Yeah, both blades were sent flying in 2 different directions, and there was a guy that was actually entering the helicopter that the blade almost knocked him in the head, and luckily, everybody went to the hospicetal, but they all escaped with minor injuries, which was crazy.
We when I was there, we only had one mishap. It was actually weather related. I was not the officer on duty that day, but a good friend of mine, he was a first lieutenant, I was a second lieutenant at the time, and he took off out of a place called Swabish Hall near Stuttgart, and he wound up in the side of the hill because it was a very foggy day, and he had to transport a VIP back to the 7th Corps headquarters, and unfortunately he wound up in the hillside.
Ooh, man.
So yeah, it's kind of tough. Even and this is peacetime. I mean, even this kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Hey, can we do a little shout out real quick first?
Absolutely.
Isn't there we have something new around here?
Oh,
I don't know. People might want to see this.
Can you see that? Do you have the camera?
I got zoomed in as far as I could. Your head's kind of in the way, but there you go. Now you're not. You're fine now.
All right. Yeah. So this, and I had posted a while back. There's a friend of the family, David. He made a Navy flag for me, and
which was awesome.
It's super cool. If you haven't seen it, I did post the picture, so you can go back through our picture history and see it. But I went to his house one day to pick up another order, and he had made this one for our program. So much props to David. Thank you so much for making this.
Muchos gracias.
I absolutely love it. I think they are awesome. And
it will be in the background of our show forever.
Exactly. I will. I will at probably over the next day or two. I will post a link to his website. You can order through his website, and he actually prefers that because he can track the orders a lot easier for him. So if you're wanting something like this, they are not terribly expensive. The more intricate, obviously, the more costly
more
it is.
detail work you got to put into it.
And this is kind of the medium size. He has one smaller than this, and then he's got ones just a handful larger. So I guess this would be the medium-high range for the size.
So in our comments later on, we'll post a link to this guy's page.
Yeah,
we can check it out.
And thank you, David. We appreciate it. We absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So I've got one at home. I've got some for friends, and I've got this now. So
I'm thinking,
are we getting close?
We're getting close. I mean, you guys might need to sip on some stuff over there, but we need to get into our sponsor talk here.
Yes. Today's sponsor, as it is for quite a couple months, is Casual Pint out in Countryside Village. Good bunch of people.
Hooray for David.
Yes. All of us are Casual Pint people, some more than others.
What's the first offering we're going to be doing here?
Well, that was kind of up to we were doing the mystery beer. I think is what
do
we're
we
going
want
to
to do the mystery beer first?
I think we start with the
I
mystery
mean,
beer.
might as well.
Yeah.
Because that's going to take up some time talking about that.
So why don't one of you talk about what that means from Casual Pint?
Yeah.
Mystery beer. Dave's got this idea of taking a keg of beer, he picks it out, and just puts it on tap and doesn't tell anyone what it is, and lets people guess what the beer is. And you pay for it just like you would any other pint or 5 ounce, and try to guess what the beer is.
So it's just a giant question mark. So
Yeah.
the staff there doesn't know. The only people that know are the owners of the place. Other than that, they keep it relatively a big mystery for everybody. So that, it's surprising when they reveal it. You can hop online and you can cast your vote of what you think it is. And then when they tap the keg, that's when they reveal what it was and what their new stuff
And-
is. They say, hey, we got a new one now.
The advantage of getting a mystery beer, by the way, is it removes all your prejudices about what the brewer is or what type of beer it might actually be.
Sure.
And
yeah.
so when you try it on there, you got the chance of figuring out what it is without prejudicing what it might actually be.
Sure. Yeah, it gives you a chance to try something new.
Right, gets you out of your comfort zone. It's only, it's very reasonably priced, about $4 for the pint. And the one thing he does put on there, which I do appreciate, is the ABV number, because sometimes you really don't want to go in and, have a very high, a 10% high ABV mystery beer.
Yeah,
So-
the ABVs is a real challenge with microbrews on there. So it's nice that he has that on there. And the advantage Dave has with doing the beers is he now has those 5 ounce glasses. I don't think he does it on the mystery beers though.
No,
but
you got to get a
but-
full glass, but it's reasonably priced. It's
but
only
it's
$4.
reasonably
Yeah, it's $4.
and they've been awesome beers so far.
And you can get a growler if you really want.
Yeah, you actually can.
Yeah, if you enjoy it that much. So
Thank you. Hang
Casual
on,
Pint.
Casual Pint.
yeah, you got some more pictures, or
I
is
do.
it?
Oh, that was it. Well, I got the inside of the place, which really doesn't show up on film all that much, and it's definitely a place for beer lovers.
Yes,
Ooh,
the best
that
way-
doesn't turn up either.
Yeah, the best way to describe it for me would be a coffee shop for beer. It's just a super chill place, but instead of serving carbonated beverages, they're serving alcoholic beverages.
Yes.
Got games, got cool people there, both patrons and staff, and they've got games every night. A certain kind of beer games.
So you can
Most
get on
nights.
their website. You can get on their Facebook page and see what's going on each night. Thursday night, I believe, is trivia night.
Wednesday is trivia night.
Oh, we got
Thursday is the
dice
dice night.
night. Yeah,
Dice night.
Thursday.
That's actually kind of a fun game.
Yep.
You roll the dice, whatever number it lands on. It's a 30-sided die. They got 30 taps. Whatever it lands on, you get $2 off of that beer if you want to. If you don't want to have that one, you can roll it again. You can get $1 off.
And if you still don't want it, then you can roll again and pay full price.
Exactly. Then you lose.
Yeah,
You lose.
Yep.
So cheers, gentlemen.
Yeah,
let's
cheers.
try this.
Cheers to the mystery beer.
Cheers to the
Yeah,
mystery beer.
clinky.
Yeah, clinky,
Well,
clinky.
air clinky across the table.
Yeah, it's kind of a reach. It's an old 8-foot Brunswick table over here.
Now, Britt and I and Ray, did you sample it also? I know Britt and I did.
Oh yeah, I've had
This one?
sampled this one.
I think I've tasted this one as well.
So it's almost an IPA, but
It's got that dry mouthfeel from the hops.
Mhm.
A little bit
That's pretty-
citrus to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little citric to it.
Yeah. Do you have any guesses, Andrew, at all?
Nah. I'm kind of holding on. It's a type of pilsner on there that's probably a close to being an IPA. Either it's that or it's a IPA that's on the light side, like a West Coast IPA.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking more pale ale, not an
That
IPA.
would make. That's what I'm thinking.
It's
yes.
it's also a session beer, because if I remember too, not to harp on the ABV,
4.5,
but it's 4.5 or 4.6, so it's a
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
It's a session beer.
Yep.
So
Which means you can drink many in a session. That's what that means.
And
if you want.
online, Thomas, one of my good friends, actually commented on their Facebook page and said that it was a Distill Soundboard session IPA. And I looked it up, and it was 4.3. I'm like, well, I mean, that's right there.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe they got a batch that was a little bit more. Who knows? But I mean, it very well could be that, because I have had that Soundboard session IPA from Distill, and it's right on the money. It's right there with that same taste.
You're right. There's a taste of an IPA in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's for me. It's that mouthfeel from the hops, that like dry, like makes your mouth feel like cotton almost. It's
Yeah.
from the hops. So but it's not overly hop flavored, so that says more pale ale to me. So that's what I'm going to go with. I don't know exactly what, but that's.
I suspect
we go
it's
with
a
that
West
category.
Coast IPA.
My guess, my original guess, which I found out, which I think I'm pretty much wrong at, was Brookway makes something called an IPL, pale lager, and
Yeah.
I checked. When I looked up the ABV on that one, it's like 5.6. So I said, well,
That's out of the running.
out of the running on that one. So
Yeah.
that's right. I was never close on any of the previous ones, so I shouldn't start now. It doesn't matter.
Karen says hi, and she says if we need some comedic relief today, I should ask you about your Old Spice factory days.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, that's if you need
That's different,
comedic. Yeah, that means you need some really bad filler.
Karen, sorry for not making it down there to grab that soup. I was DJing a little private, or not DJing, but I was running the soundboard for a little private event. If people knew what was going on, Adam Vine came into town and filmed a Netflix special yesterday at the Orpheum. Well, today he had a little secret party down at the Hive, and Jake was like, hey, I need you to run the soundboard. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Do I get to meet Adam Vine? Okay.
That was a cool picture.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
That's
It
nice.
works out right.
Yeah.
We'll have to post that.
It was a lot of fun.
Yes. Well, let's talk about what Veterans Day means to each one of us. And the thing I like about it is on this side of the table, we're veterans. On that side of the table, we have civilians. So
civilians.
But in all fairness,
Rubbish over there.
There was
in all-
nothing bad about
I'm just
that.
giving you a hard time.
in all fairness, I have 3 military members in my ancestry. So
Oh, okay.
I got my father was a World War II vet. I have another cousin that was also in World War II, and then back a generation. I have a Union soldier, and then go
Oh,
further.
wow.
There's a Revolutionary soldier.
Oh, wow.
So I got a long history in the country. So I got lots of interest in the history and military engagement. So Veterans Day, for me, means lineage. It means heritage. It means family. It means passion to fight for what you believe for, defending your home, defending your beliefs on it. So it's a really strong sentiment to me.
Nice. So you grew up with some pretty much a strong sense on that day. It wasn't just like another government holiday for you growing up. There was some meaning to
Another
it.
one of those banks are closed on Mondays.
when you talk about there's another element to this on there, and those that go into the medical profession, those are the survivors of the veterans that survived these big wars like Vietnam and so forth on it. There's a sense of humility about it, because we remember those that get injured and hurt and visibly harmed. We forget those that come home and lost all their friends in that war. And that happened in World War II. I mean, you have a man that would be, his only family was his whole unit, and now all his units gone. He comes back to the United States. He doesn't go to the parades. He doesn't go anywhere. He ends up becoming a drunk because
He's trying to forget.
He's lost.
He's
everyone.
numbing the pain.
Well, they didn't have the mental health help that they do today.
Right. And the wars were much more tragic because you're getting arms blown off and carnage on a regular basis on there, where now it's moved on to drones.
Yeah, I think
I'm not. But
Right.
since World War II, some of that's changed on there. And when you go back in the history of that, I mean, go back to Civil War. They don't have anything to
Pellets.
do with bacteria. Well,
Right.
you get gangrene, we cut your arm off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that scene from Dances with Wolves where they
No, thank you.
Yeah. Britt, you wanna weigh in on that one?
What it means to me is a day of remembrance. I mean, a never forget, but sometimes we don't remember. And it's one of those days to just pay homage to the people that allow us to live in this land. I mean, I'll say kind of for free. We'll say that. But there was a lot of people out there before my time. I wasn't in the military at all. That I'm thankful for. You put your life on the line so that we didn't become the next Germany, or the next Russia, or the next China. It's
The next Soviets, the next Marxists.
exactly.
Mhm.
So
Right, yeah.
thank you for doing that and allowing me to live here amongst you all.
Yeah.
A
Right.
day of humility and humbleness.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, I
That's
do
good.
have to. I piggyback on the idea of the remembrance,
Mhm.
because really, except for like the Vietnam War was probably in my recollection, or maybe the Gulf War, but those are the most televised wars.
Right.
People actually saw what was going on. Now, the difference between Vietnam, the Vietnam War pictures and the stuff you saw for Desert Storm was quite sanitized.
Right.
You saw the bombs drop and you saw something blow up, but you didn't see what happened there. You didn't see the actions of troops on the ground back then. In Vietnam you did, but now we have a whole generation who didn't see what was going on in Vietnam. Now, obviously, you could say what you will about how the press covered Vietnam,
Right.
but the troops running like hell to get on the UH-1, and they're all bandaged up and broken up. We don't see those images anymore. We don't see the folks in Afghanistan. We don't see the guys in Iraq until they come back. So the job that they do, we don't really see the job that they
Right.
do. And when they come back, they come back way different than they are when they left.
Yeah, there are a couple documentaries out there that you can watch to get pretty close. There was like Into the Hornet's Nest was one, I think. And then there's other documentaries or movies that they try and explain.
I would suggest that since Vietnam, we lost 55,000 soldiers. I mean, that's a huge number compared to these recent ones.
And when
But
they came back, they got
really
a
had
rude. Oh man!
Right. And this generation on there, as brutal as I think most of it is heavily mental, because I never realized to what extent some of these people are on their third, fourth, fifth return
tour
back there, and that's unheard of. I mean,
Right.
back in the past, you'd be lucky if you go back twice,
Right.
because you'd be blown apart. And now in this generation, we survive, but then mentally, that's another story.
Yeah. And I think that mental health. I had mentioned that earlier with World War I, World War II, which they had zero from that, which is why
It was whiskey.
pretty much. Well, and we're going to talk about the USS Cole here in a little bit, but and I was friends with a lot of those. My roommate was on it, and a really close friend of mine was on it. And when those guys came back, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot. There was some mental health for them, but not a lot. It was mainly the bottle that they turned to.
The thing is now this gentleman that we were talking about, SNL, you were mentioning it.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
But when you go through 3 or 4 tours like that, you end up with having each separation. You have a difficulty trying to organize go back to your normal life on there.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you get called back on it, and you feel compelled to go back because there's part of it you miss. And that's
I think some of that was the camaraderie that you were talking about
Right.
with your unit and all
right.
that. So.
There's something in it that tests your manhood that brings you back to it.
The definitely the veterans of World War II, and I hate to use this, I don't want to generalize at them, but some of my wife's most precious patients are the World War II vets. Some of the
greatest generation.
Yep. These 90-year-old men, when my wife walks into the room and they're on the exam table, they will stand up because a woman walked in the room.
Mm-hmm. They were taught,
And some of her most troublesome patients, unfortunately, are the Vietnam vets, because a lot of them, were very bitter.
Well, and even the ones that did come back, didn't come back all the way.
And that's the thing. That's the one thing about you hear about how they there's talk about advertising the VA hospital, essentially putting it and there's arguments for and against that, but one of the things that the veterans probably would not get that's at a private system that they would get under a government system is the mental health care aspect of it all.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely an element of there that needs to be worked with, because I think in the time periods, can't imagine the possibility of going back a third or fourth time on there. With World War II, they went there. They knew they were going to serve till the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So once the war was over, it's easy to just disconnect a bit. I mean, not completely. If you've been in a bad battle on it, you're not going to disconnect. But they could at least say the war was over. It's done. You can't say that about these latest wars.
Well, and some of those, like World War I, World War II. I mean, you went off to war, and when you came back, you went they discharged you and you went back to your life. And here today, you may sign up for 4, 6, 8, 10 years, whatever you want to do, and you got to keep on going in the military, and we're still over there, so your rotation's coming up every other year or whatever that may be, and just keep on trucking. So I do some of the mental health things that I wanted to get in, and I know I didn't really talk about what Veterans Day means to me. I can do that at the end, but
yeah, why, Brian? Come on,
well,
what's it mean to you?
Cough it up.
Come on, like
Cough it up. You only have a Navy shirt on.
I know, right? Yeah. Which is funny because I think I wore the same hoodie on the last episode, but whatever.
No big
It's
deal.
one of my favorites. For me, Veterans Day means it. God, I get so choked up, and I don't get choked up often on just in life in general, but on Veterans Day, just. It makes me reflect. I mean, we kind of piggyback, like you said, on the remembering and reflecting on just my time in, the people that I was with, the people that I served with, the people that came before me, the people that are still in today, the ones that did not come home, the ones that are anxious to get in, because future veterans, what the current state of affairs, both here in the United States and globally, is, both in politics and what that means for the military. A lot of those things come to mind, and I try not to do too much during the day because I want to sit alone with those thoughts and reflect, because it is a humbling experience when you think about just the sheer numbers, which I'm going to get into here. It's deeply touching to, I would think, any veteran. I know that there's those that serve and were bitter about their whole time and got out and just have nothing good to say about the military. I think that's a very small portion of the people. The majority of veterans, I believe, their time in was very special to them, whether it was 4 years or 20 years or longer. I think that you have a kinship with the people that you serve with. And there's a bond not only with the ones that you directly served with, but ones that are in the military in general. Like, Ray, you were in the Air Force. I was in the Navy. You were in at a completely different time. But because we're both veterans, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
There's a connection there that most people don't understand that have never been in. And that's kind of what Veterans Day. It's hard, and I don't want to discount from your guys' aspect, but like Veterans Day to veterans is like
there's the element of fire of war that's in there, and
Yep.
if you had that threat and you could be losing your life at some given moment on it, it's going to have an impact on you, and that someone else has bought into that same badge.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And it's amazing how close and how quickly you can get that close to people. It's the camaraderie. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it in regular life. It's you bond with people so quickly and so deeply. It's amazing.
Well, and again, like to follow up on that, really, I've been out in the workforce probably now obviously longer than I've been in the military. But when I was in the military, it was a profession. It was the profession of arms.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much of that outside anywhere else. You have the legal profession,
mm-hmm.
and you have the medical profession, and in those professions you study those folks who come before you, the Supreme Court justices, Western civilization, and how our laws came from there, all the way back to Hippocrates on the medical side. It's a profession. You are linked somehow way back then. When I walk into my position, okay, there's people around me who have the same skill set, but we're employees. I don't consider myself in a profession any longer. I don't have that same kind of contact that I did with those folks that I worked with in the military.
Yeah,
Right.
That's a really
Well
good
put.
way to look at it. Yeah. Well, let's get into some of the numbers here. No, you know what? I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. So, because I see a few people on that I was actually on the ship
Making
with.
some asking some questions.
Well, not asking some questions, but there's a couple people viewing that I was actually on the USS Baton with, that I was in the Navy with. And I reached out to some friends of mine out there. We have a group, and one of the guys got back to me that was on the ship with me, and I was a fire controlman, weapon systems, and he was also in that department. He his name is HTC, which is a whole technician. Just made chief 2 years ago, Dennis Lansangen, and he wrote me back a really good email, and I wish I could read the whole thing, but it's one of those kind of long.
Right.
But it was amazing. So first off, thank you, Dennis, for doing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to write a long email. I know how that is.
Absolutely. Yeah, on your phone, just
No.
Oh yeah. But thank you. And so I've got some cliff notes here of what he sent back, and it's really interesting. He grew up in Virginia Beach. Came to the United States when he was 6 months old, he said, and his dad was a senior chief in the Navy and spent most of his time in Virginia Beach, which is where I lived for 5 years because I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia.
Great little place.
It was. It's a very cool place. And the whole area is almost nothing but military. I mean, it's hard to go anywhere and not see military of some sort, and which plays into this here in just a minute. He said that when he was growing up, because he went to school there and all that before he joined the military, and there wasn't really a lot of celebration of Veterans Day. They had a day off of school, but not a lot of places offered, free meals or whatever that you see around the country. And he thinks that a lot of that was because there was just such a heavy military presence that, if you offered free lunch, you would literally have every one of your patrons,
right?
You'd be
Everyone
beating
be
the
there.
town.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So and that's nothing against the Virginia Beach or the whole Hampton Roads area there, but he said when he moved to Texas, he spent he was active duty from 1998 to 2008, and in 2004 he moved to Texas, to Houston, and to become a recruiter. And he said when he moved to Texas, holy buckets. He said the way they view the military there is nothing but it just oozes gratitude. He said out there that people go out of their way. The first time he was there in his military uniform, he said there were like two patrons fighting over to pay for his meal, and he's like, this is not, I was just there with my family, and I wasn't asking for anything. And that was something that he brought up with Veterans Day. He's not one of those veterans, and neither am I. Like today, I went out and I got a free beer.
But you're not looking for handouts.
No, and that's the way he is. He enjoys a good hamburger for free every now and again, but he's not looking. He doesn't have his hands out. And there are veterans that do, and I don't fault them for that. I'm just not one that does that. But on the flip side of that, he said ever since he made chief, which those of you that are not Navy is E7. Which is a pretty high rank. Actually, when you make chief, I think it takes an act of Congress to fire you from that
That's
position.
higher than the position in the Nebraska Navy.
yeah, we got a hell of a waterfront.
I've seen that, down there in Missouri.
Yep.
Dodge Park.
But he said ever since he made chief, it actually made him take an active role in becoming more aware of recognizing other veterans. Which I would implore any veteran to do. I think we all do in general, but the Veterans Day is a great day to do that, is recognizing other veterans. So thank you again, Dennis, for writing all that and your insight into that. It was a very well written email, and he's got other questions that him and I need to catch up on. So I told him we need to do that at some point. I want to get into some stats here for veterans. So how many veterans are there? Kind of gives you an idea of how many people have
Hundreds
served.
of thousands, I would assume.
20 million.
Yeah.
So that's an approximate number. I got this from the VA.gov, .gov website. They were using a 2016 model, but it's a 2017 number. So not overly, not entirely accurate, but pretty darn close. To put that in perspective, that is 6% of the population of the United States, and that is all living veterans in the United States. Is 6% of the entire population of the United States.
I would have thought it would have been more.
Yeah,
frankly, I would have thought
there are hundreds of thousands of people in each branch, Some are small, like Marines is a smaller branch.
Now-
Army is a larger.
Back when it was essentially mandatory, here's the lotto, you're going in.
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
The draft was in Vietnam,
Vietnam.
but they.
Okay. So there are some of those guys still out there.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Actually, the largest percentage right now is the Gulf War veterans. Gulf War was 1990 to 1991.
Because we've had a long engagement with Iraq. at
Right,
this point.
and
But-
also time too. I mean,
But
if you think about,
I think there's one element on there that should be mentioned.
and I meant the first Persian Gulf War,
Right.
not the current one.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing is that we've had more military engagements in the later 20th century
Oh,
on
sure.
here, where we're trying to
Not wars, but operations. and
operations,
engage- yep. Mhm.
protection orders, things things doing that matter of it. I think what's interesting about that statistic on there is people forget how many people actually served in Vietnam at
Mhm.
that point. And when it plays out on politics, people forget that.
Mhm.
And these people saw actual combat on a regular basis on it. And that's where there's some friction, I think, sometimes, because you'll have people say, well, you went to Iraq, you stood in the sand for 6 months and came home.
Mhm.
And where someone went to Vietnam, fought in engagement and sunk in a swamp, and then came home and got spit on.
Mhm.
Different attitudes come from those.
Oh sure.
Yeah, they're
Well,
still dusting off the Agent Orange on them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And if you really want to get technical, I mean, we're all veterans, but there is like three categories of them. There's veteran, there's war veteran, and there's combat veteran.
Right.
And all three
That's
of those
what I was
mean-
trying to point
Exactly.
out.
Right.
Yeah. That's
'Cause
kind of where I thought you were going.
Because I
on
think
that.
the definition of a veteran is someone who served, I believe it's six consecutive months on active duty. So then after that, you are considered a veteran, whether it was called up from the reserves and you had to go help out down in Texas for hurricane relief and you actually were on active duty, or you were deployed overseas in an administrative role for 6 months, did one tour, come back, wound up back in the reserve and never rotated back into active duty in order to for another tour. At that point you're a military veteran.
Right.
Mhm.
That's
Well, and they
that's
even
the
tell you
point.
in boot camp, once you start boot camp, you're a veteran.
If you survive boot camp.
No, they say day one, but yeah. I mean, boot camp it's 2 to 3 months depending on your branch, and so or longer if you get into special teams. But
Yeah, I remember coming and seeing you up in Chicago when
Yeah.
you graduated.
yeah, that was a fun time living a year up there.
Yeah, not to belittle Texas, but actually the worst 3 months of my life
Oh,
were
yeah.
in San Antonio.
Probably in the middle of the summer, right?
No, just about. It was May, June, and beginning
Oh,
of July.
boy.
That
Oh,
was
boy.
that was where it was Lackland Air Force Base outside of San Antonio, where I went for my officer training school.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I graduated boot camp October 31st, 97, and they had a heck of a snowstorm there, and it was before I actually started. You'd move from recruit training command to naval training command, but I hadn't started classes yet, so you're nobody. So I shoveled a lot of snow during that winter. But I just graduated boot camp, so I was in peak physical
He
condition.
got a snow shoveling medal.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So back to like the Gulf War veterans. It's approximately 7.5 million Gulf War veterans, whereas the Vietnam veterans is about 6.3 million, which is still a fair amount. And then
Right.
as you go back further, obviously you get less and less veterans. So those. Are we?
Yes, we
Time
are.
for a break. Yeah, this is actually a really good time for a break.
Exactly, that's what I was
So
thinking.
what should we do next?
Let's do celebration. Should
All
we do
right.
that?
And that's the one that you ordered. Want Ray?
Yeah,
since
say-
you ordered that one.
Well,
we were there.
one of the glass ones is celebration as well.
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, no, but I mean when we were actually at Casual
Oh
Pint
yeah,
earlier
that's,
today.
that's
so,
right.
Uh,
Speaking of Casual Pint, I
yeah.
will throw up the graphic.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh
Casual
yes,
Pint.
Celebration is brewed by Sierra Nevada. It is their winter seasonal beer. It is a wet hopped IPA.
Wet fresh hop.
Wet fresh hop. They keep throwing it in. Well, throwing it in, and
Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
yes,
You have not.
I
had
don't
this yet?
have it. I'm not a big fan of Sierra Nevada. I drank a couple of them, and I kind of like it. There was other stuff beers I preferred, but
Sure.
I open it.
But as of right now,
But
if
I
you
think they're good.
if you are a Sierra Nevada fan, they are right now doing a tap takeover there at the Pint. So I think 5 or 6 of their taps are
But you got to
them.
get there soon because
Yes.
I think some of the there's about 5 or 6 on tap, and I think some of them are on their or the barrels are getting empty. Let's put it that way. I think one actually went off tap this afternoon.
For advice to those that have not been to the Casual Pint, I would advise watching their Facebook page for this stuff that comes up on there, because when they do a tap takeover, I guarantee you a third of those beers will blow out within a day.
Oh yeah,
So you'll miss out unless you're there.
single day, and then you know.
Well, when they announce there's a tap takeover on there, if you think you're going to it's all going to be there 3 days later, I'm telling you it's
No.
not happening.
No. Right.
And you want to go on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, because on Tuesdays they don't have any games, but it is all day happy hour. So beer is $1 off, drafts are $1 off all day, and Wednesday they have the trivia night. However, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, some of the distributors will drop an unannounced beer off. And Dave may or may not put that on the website. I was lucky enough one day to get my hands on some King Sue from Toppers Goliath.
You're not supposed to tell anyone.
But, yep, you got to go in and take a look. It's kind of like Costco. You never know what you'll find on the shelf.
I mean, I'm sure the majority of the people that watch a show are probably beer lovers, because I'd say 80-20 we do beer compared to liquor and all that stuff. But
We clinky before we drinky.
This is an awesome beer. This is good beer.
that King Sue, man, everybody's going gaga for it.
Well, Pseudo Sue was the one beer that's really been going over.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
the-
Pseudo Sue's great.
Absolutely, and this is kind of the notch above.
just-
Yep. Yeah, that's one of my. We actually, the last home brew that I did, we cloned Pseudo Sue.
Oh, you're a clone brewer.
Oh, normally I was a kit brewer before that, and then we graduated and said, well, let's see how far we can get.
I could go for a long discussion on microbrews between microboozing, microcrap, and microcloning. And there's those 3 types that are out there, but it makes what the fun of microbrews.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. Something interesting about Sierra Nevada. I know you said you weren't like a huge fan. You've had some.
The Sierra Nevada, it's not that I'm against them. It's just
This
that
is
they
good, though.
became
This is
really
good, though.
popular suddenly. And they're all over the place.
Well, and probably because, and I didn't know if you knew this, but I had a friend of mine. Not that you knew about my friend, but more about Sierra Nevada. So he was
whatever.
Yeah, he was going to get his beer judge certification. And so he invited me over to the house. He's like, "Hey, you want to come over and drink some beers?" I'm like,
yeah,
sure."
See you at 5.
So I walk into his house and he hands me a packet, and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "We're gonna get through this, and then we'll have some fun." I said, "Okay, all right." So, but what I was surprised was there's a lot of Sierra Nevada beers that they use for the beer judge certification program probably because of the quality control that they have.
Sure.
So they were using them as the standard for the style. So they must
every time they brew that
because-
beer, it's the same beer.
Because they stick also with a particular style that people are familiar with,
Right.
and it comes out right.
Yeah,
that's
they brewed a
that's-
style, not
that's-
brewed a taste.
And that's one of the things that I think some people have. The arguments between craft brewers and microbrewers. What taste do you aim for?
Right. Yeah.
And you have to have one be a standard, and then you have to have something that's inventive and memorable.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a
Sierra's been around a long time, at least in the Omaha region.
Right.
I remember back in the mid-1990s, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was the only beer that was distributed here in Nebraska from Sierra Nevada. But it was popular. You'd find it in a lot of bars in the area.
I might be mistaken, but I think Sierra Nevada for a long time only had about 4 or 5 different beers. And then suddenly they started really
branching out
a bit more and doing more.
They had
Or at least maybe the distributors only carried 2 or 3 at one time, and then suddenly they started carrying more of it.
They had one of my favorite IPAs. It was a Ruthless Rye IPA. It was in like a gray can. They made it only for like a year and a half, and then just stopped production. And I was very upset about that because it was a fantastic beer.
Drive me nuts.
I finally found it.
That was one of those dry ones that would take your cheeks and suck it down your throat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
God.
What are your impressions of this one? This was very clear. Obviously a filtered beer, amber to brown in color.
In remembrance and celebrating the vets, we're drinking Celebration.
There you go.
Absolutely.
I like it. You referred to it kind of as a Christmas beer, I think is what you said. And I would, the first one we drank, I'd say was more of a Christmas because it's got that kind of cinnamony flavor. It reminds you of Christmas while you're drinking. I would say is a winter beer, or yes, Christmas, but more of a winter beer.
It's a winter lager type thing.
Yeah, I just called it. I just mentioned that it's their Christmas beer. It's their winter beer. This is their winter seasonal, shall we say? I guess to be more accurate.
That's good.
I can definitely taste it, and it tastes great.
The spice notes on it are so subtle. You get them. I mean, it's not just like a brown beer to me. It could be a German beer. It could be a regular brown beer, and they're similar in flavor. This has like notes of spice, but subtle enough to where
something's
not
overpowering.
I think the overwhelming taste here is the hops.
Absolutely,
and this is something that a hop drinker will like.
Well, yeah, with it the wet hop, fresh hop IPA. Yeah, I would rate this one really high. This is a very good beer. I honestly don't remember it being this dark when we were at Casual Pint earlier.
That's all right. No, it's that pretty color.
These are the new cups.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the new cups. So yeah, feel free to take these home. This is your consolation prize for.
Thank you.
Coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have to have some way to keep people to come back.
Yeah. I don't want your dirty dishes after we're done.
Yeah.
If there's beer, I'll be here.
There you go. All right, so next topic I kind of wanted to get into was because we had talked about mental illness and health, mental health aspect of veterans, the homeless aspect of veterans. Homeless veterans is there's a lot of veterans out there that are homeless. What's interesting, poor choice of words, but I don't have a better one. 2017 actually marked the first year since 2010 that there was an increase in the homeless veteran population. Not really sure why.
Was it because it was recorded?
No, because
have they been keeping track every single year?
So let me back up a little bit. In 2010, President Obama actually signed into action, not necessarily a war on homeless veterans, but like he was trying
the war on homeless veterans.
Yeah. Let's do
another war.
Yeah.
I think I see clickbait somewhere.
Yeah, he was actively trying to help homeless veterans in 2010.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. So for the last 7 years, but for some reason, last year, 2017, there was an increase. Not really sure why.
I can give you a clue to that.
I'm sure that
the problem is the housing is expensive to create, and it's taxed, and it's subject to various taxations on it, and it's also subject to regulations and so forth on it. You never know where, and depending on the city and municipality you're dealing with on there. So what happens is people get put in a situation where it's better to be homeless than to deal with the debt of a rental place or house. So depending on the circumstance, some of these people may be classified as homeless. They may be deliberately hobos.
Or
because there are people that will sleep in their cars to avoid paying rent on an apartment on there, and they'll do that for a couple months on there until they get a job that will allow them to go back to a rental.
For sure.
But then some of them, I'm saving $500 a month by sleeping in a car. Why would I go back to renting?
Or if you have an RV, or do the tiny homes count as a home? I mean, if it's
those fall under
living in a van down by the river kind of thing.
Those fall under regulation issues on there. I mean, you try to put the. I would love to see some of those planted in the city. Some places on it, but I think they're too small. They violate planning regulations on it, so you can't build them on it.
That's still better. I mean, it's a notch above. I mean, if you have a roof over your head,
well, that's the thing.
Even if it's a small roof.
Let me give you an example. They're arguing
tiny
now.
house land.
Yeah,
they're arguing.
They're talking about it.
They're arguing right now with Omaha about these registering landowners, for example.
Mm-hmm.
All it's going to do and creating inspections on it. Well, all it's going to do is add an additional cost on it, and it makes them just less affordable on it. And at the same time, it makes less people willing to create an apartment or build in it. So you got a lot of conflict of those things.
We do have a lot of apartments here in Omaha.
And part of that may be because of property taxes. But when it comes to the veterans on there, some of these veterans, it's better to take your pension and sleep in a car than give it to rent. And some of their personal circumstances may be that it's not wise to be engaged in a family event or something like that, it's just easier to sleep in the car or sleep on the street. And that sounds really terrible.
But it's actually a valid point.
But that it's out there, and people think that hoboing and homeless are exactly the same thing. They're not.
Right.
There are people that are going to say, "I'm getting $1,000 check.
It's their choice to do that.
I'm going to get a $1,000 check. I'm going to put it in the bank on here. I'm not going to give it to some place to rent. I don't need a place. I don't want a place to clean up. Why do I need an apartment? It means it needs a vacuum cleaner. I don't want a vacuum cleaner.
Well, that was kind of like
And
I don't want to mow the lawn.
And it may be a mental problem too, but that's out there, and people don't seem to realize it. I think it's gotten worse.
Well, and I think that is something actually vets think. Like when I did the GI Bill, I was actually going to UNO at the time, and I was paying. I got the GI Bill, and I was still paying out of pocket to go to UNO, and I'm like, why am I doing this? So then I went to Metro, which is a community college,
Right.
and that more than covered it, and I still had a little bit left over, and I was going to school full time. So I mean, it's a financial decision.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Absolutely. A valid point. Good job bringing that up.
Yeah. Found that very interesting.
So of the homeless if you take like all people that are homeless, which is a very hard statistic to find out. That's something that's really hard to calculate.
Right.
11.
You're just going around. I see that you're homeless. Are you a vet too?
Yeah.
Oh, check that box.
So 11.
He owns a gun, therefore he's a veteran.
Oh yeah.
Of the homeless population, 11% are veterans, which, earlier the statistic was of the population of the United States, 6% are veterans, but of the homeless population, 11% are
Interesting.
homeless.
What?
So, and that was from the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, or NCHV.org.
This goes back to the mental illness issue and ending a war. I mean, there's an end to the Vietnam War. There's an end to the World War II. But where was the end to Iraq, and where's the end to Afghanistan?
The
Right,
war
still
on
going, yeah.
terror.
Yeah,
Essentially.
it's turned into an open-ended thing where people get engaged in it, and that causes more mental problems.
That's why the first one was called Enduring Freedom. I mean,
So you think if
Operation
someone,
Enduring Freedom.
yeah, it goes on forever.
Yeah.
so that causes I think that causes a mental problem, because if you go back and forth on it, you literally have two senses of home.
Mm-hmm.
One's chaotic and one is too docile.
Right. Well, there's a lot to be said about like combat veterans when they're no longer over there, but they still need that adrenaline rush from being over there.
Right.
And that's why you see them doing thrill seeking or whatever the case may be to try and get that thrill, because you can't really get it here. So, yeah, there's something to be said.
Well, you could
for that,
jump out of
for
a
sure.
plane. I mean, there's thrill-seeking things you can
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
to raise your adrenaline.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings up PTSD, which leads me into the next topic here. So, here on Wednesday, those that have been paying attention to the news, there was a mass shooting out in California.
Yeah.
Thousand Oaks, California.
The day after our big vote.
Yeah, very terrible. And the shooter was actually a former Marine. I know that once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine, but for the sake of argument, he was no longer enlisted. He was a former Marine. Of that, there were 12 dead. I honestly don't know if that included him or not, because he ended up
It was 13 when it included
with him.
him.
Okay, so he did end his own life there. It was just at a music bar in Thousand Oaks, California.
And he looked like a regular Joe. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I saw him on the Facebook. It's like, this guy looks popular. This guy looks like he's got a lot of friends. And even his friends came out and was like, no, he used to come to the bar all the time. And, like, he was a pretty cool dude. Like, I don't even see why he would have done this.
And it's a repeat. It seems like a repeat of the Las Vegas situation almost.
Mm-hmm.
And those issues out there, I think it has to do with isolation. I don't know if it has to do. I mean, the military is very tactile. You have to deal with weapons. You have to deal with guns. You have to deal with it. Our digital age,
You don't have to
everything's you don't have to do.
There's still
with this.
outlets for that. I mean, like here we have the Tactical 88. You can go there and for a cost of a membership, you can go out there and shoot whenever you want. And even if you want, like,
Right across the street.
but
They've
that-
got an
that's
indoor
not-
gun range right across the
Oh,
street.
yeah,
That's
right,
not that's not what I mean. If I asked you how much these beer cost, most of us would think today in the modern era, it's a swipe of a plastic card.
Yes.
And where in the past, it's $5,
Hard-earned
$10,
cash.
Hard in cash. Digital era causes distance between people. So someone, you can be on Facebook all you want and have all these friends, but be completely lonely.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
that's
absolutely.
the problem of the digital era,
and
and I think that's what plays into this stuff.
Well, and he was actually posting to Instagram.
Right.
Who's
right up
who's
until
the
that
comedian?
moment.
Robin Williams.
Yeah.
What are you? You took your life because you were unhappy and you didn't have a whole lot of friends. I'm like, what? Hold on, you're a comedian. You're loved by millions of people. I'll be your friend.
Yeah,
you know,
there are demons that people fight.
Absolutely.
That nobody will know. I mean,
unless they come out and say it.
I think
he did not want to do what was that? Where he was portrayed as a woman, and they were going to do number 2 of it.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Doubtfire. They were going to do number 2. He really didn't want to do that.
No, because one was great.
But
we don't need a second one.
He was broke from the divorce of his from his last divorcee. I don't remember the situation. He was in debt to her somewhere like that way, from what I recall. But that was a really sad situation because you can see how someone completely depressed who just needs to have someone
there
watching them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in the digital era, we're not there for people anymore. It's like, you can always call me up.
I'm
you
gonna
could
press
always
the
Facebook
like button.
Yeah.
I have a.
It doesn't
the like
work
button.
that way.
I have a really interesting humanizing story on Robin Williams, and this was it's going to date me a little bit, but back when he was doing Mork and Mindy.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
I remember some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was
a great, funny movie.
Absolutely,
great, funny series.
But that really made him rise to stardom. Was that show, and after that show had ended, he was doing his stand up, and he was trying to break away from that because that show was ended. So now we got something new to start.
He wanted to do serious acting.
Absolutely. Well, not or something else.
Right.
He didn't want to be remembered as that character.
Right. So there's an actual video of him doing stand up, and like the crowd's like just yelling at him, like, "Do more, do more." And he's like, "No, I'm
over that.
Ended.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to." And you can see it like in his face, like just the. Dang it! I'm gonna be
stuck with this guy.
Gonna have to do this again. And he finally breaks down and acquiesces to the crowd. But I mean, you could see it in his face. Just
I don't want to do this.
There's a part to celebrities that they don't tell you about.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have that favorite song that everyone wants them to do, but they've done it so many times they hate it. They absolutely hate it.
That's when you know you're a professional.
A true story. Bobby McFadden. He did "Don't Worry, Be Happy." He hates doing that song. He's written symphony art, musical masterpieces, and then like he's performing, we were like, "Don't worry, be happy." He's like,
John,
I don't want to be remembered for that.
Well, John Cleese went further with it. So he says, we were doing these reunion things and going to these
Monty
audience,
Python
and the audience knows the lines better than we do. What the heck's going on?
How many years ago was that for us?
What were you going to say there, Ray?
That's the same case with Van Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
And same with David Bowie. The last couple of years of his life, he said anything from basically the Changes One album that he did, his hit song, everything else, that was done. He was done with that in concert.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He wanted to move on.
Oh, yeah. I believe it, yeah. You just get tired of doing the same old stuff.
Yeah, and I see both sides of the argument. A, it made you who you are. And then B, it's like, well, I've done it so many times. Can we please leave that in the past?
And sometimes it wasn't what made them. Someone else wrote the song. They got popular off it, and then they don't like it on it because it really has nothing to do with their life, or it has to do with a segment of their life they want to forget.
Ooh. We got a question from David, actually.
Yeah.
From Casual Pint.
Hey.
Yeah, he's checking
thanks
up
for the
on you
beers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Here's what I'm going to do right
so
here.
His question is most famous veteran. So I'll pose that to you. My answer is me. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you know who I'm going to mention.
Most famous veteran that everybody would know. Well, it's going to depend on the era. Like growing up, the most famous.
That's going to be a problem.
Yeah, most famous veteran for me growing up is going to be probably Bob Ross.
Wow, nice.
He was a drill instructor, and if earlier generations, I would say Captain Kangaroo. So he was actually Special Forces.
Who's the guy that's always plays the lieutenant, real short hair, and he's always talking in an angry voice?
Arlie
Emery. Or
that guy.
Yeah.
That'd be my guy.
Passed away.
Yeah, he just recently passed away.
Yeah.
Unfortunate to hear.
Bo Jackson's another. If you were a sports fan, he was a Navy pilot, actually.
Oh, was he?
And in a dual sport, football and baseball.
Oh, Roger Staubach.
Yeah. So it depends on the era, I think. If you're talking today,
that's kind of difficult because there's generals I would prefer to name, but then there's also soldiers I would prefer to name. And I don't know. There was a movie done, a World War II guy. He was a pacifist. I can't remember his name off the top.
conscientious
Objector.
Yeah.
And I know the guy's name. It's not coming to my head. I can't remember the name.
Is that the one that actually took 140 hostages and all that? Because we were just talking about that at dinner today.
This was from World War
crazy.
II.
Yeah,
because
this is from World
Japan. Japan had taken an island on there, and these men were on the top of the hill on there, and they had been ambushed so severely. And here's this guy who's a pacifist. He's part of the medical corps. He goes up there and he drags the men back down the cliff on there and lowers them down to the ground on there. And this is where he becomes a hero on there. And now I just can't not think of his name off the top of my head. But it was a great movie on it.
Saving Private Ryan?
No.
I'm just saying that'd be another.
Let's not forget Elvis Presley, because remember, he never died. He just went home.
That's right.
Oh,
and he was a veteran.
Hey, the audience out there has Google. They can find it, right?
Yeah.
It was a movie just a couple of years ago.
We're not looking it up. We don't like to look things up on the program because it takes away from that. So if those, I see there's several, Karen's still on, Murmur's musing, which has commented. Thank you, Murmur. I always appreciate your comments, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to the one there.
Those that watch our show, please answer these questions that we have sometimes.
They know that one, and it's just sticking to my head.
Karen said Elvis for the win.
Elvis for the win. Boom.
Yep, and I don't know how many people know. I mean, he did a short stint in the military, joined up, so I don't know how many people.
I was just at Graceland not too long ago. I was out there in Memphis, Tennessee, 5 months ago, and decided to take a quick little tour of that place.
And your quote that you said, Elvis just went home, was that from Men in Black?
Yes, it was.
I just now thought it was just like Men in Black. Yep. All right. That was just on on TV. I just
my wife hates it because I have to turn it on just for the second half of the. I can miss the first half, okay, but I love the second half.
We're at the top of the hour, and I think
time for the next one.
Time for the next one.
All right, so we just did Celebration. What are we doing next? Are we doing Abracadabra or 60 Minute?
The Abracadabra. That's
Bells.
Yeah, that's the Bells.
All right. Who wants to talk about this one?
The 60 Minute was kind of bought by me.
All right. So who wants to talk about Abracadabra?
I've never had it before.
Neither have I. I have to be totally ignorant of this.
What beer brewer are we talking about?
Bells
Brewing Company. I don't know anything about it, really.
I don't know if I had it before.
Okay.
I may have, but I don't know.
It's a coffee stout, so this is going to be quite a bit darker.
This will be to my liking then.
All right. Well, can you at least talk about the coffee stout category while I'm pouring?
Yeah, and I'll look up Bell's.
Stouts are very more into the chalky category for some people on there, but with the coffee stouts, the real challenge is trying to make a smooth taste to the coffee on it. It'll be very interesting how this competes with.
What's it called?
Pint 9, which has a coffee stout called
Abracadabra. It's that bottom one there.
Yeah, I was like,
I can't remember the name of it.
Abracadabra.
So it'll be interesting
I
how
want
this
to reach
tastes.
out and grab you.
Now you're dating yourself.
There it is.
And not in a good way, maybe.
How did you guys tape this? Come on, Casual Pint.
Right?
It's to FDA standards.
The miracle of E-tape.
I know, right?
So I just went onto the Bell's website, and it said year, month, day, and I typed in the year, and it was like, you're good. You're fine. This is a 5.5. Shelf life is 6 months on it. Let's see here. Abracadabra. The Abraca bean. Roasted with Abraca bean. That's hence why they get the Abracadabra from.
Okay.
That makes sense. Special malts into creamy, intense coffee stout. So I used to be a Bud Light drinker, a Bud Select drinker.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, this was.
We got to start somewhere, right?
We all have to start somewhere, and this is back when we used to do drinking games and like. You don't want to do drinking games with the beers we've been drinking. No, you'll get drunk really fast, really quick. But then Brian actually got me into IPAs, and I was like, wow. And I'm starting to open up my eyes about things. And I was put off by these dark stouts. I was like, no way. That's too medium rare steak for me. I don't need a steak for my beer. But I've really opened up my eyes in the last 2 years, 3 years. I'm like, dark beers actually have a nice ring to them. Have a good taste to them.
One of the misconceptions I think a lot of folks have about porters and stouts is that because it's a dark beer, it's supposed to taste like motor oil. It's high ABV and high calories.
Yeah. Well, everybody ranks it like, okay, Guinness.
Right.
Boom.
Well,
And by Guinness is your basic dry stout, which
But that's where they're judging it from.
right. And but it only has it's not a high alcohol beer. Stouts are generally light. It's when you get those imperial stouts like the
strong Russian
the Russian imperials like Northcote's
Old
Rasputin.
Epic Blackout Stout.
that kind of stuff.
There's another reason though
17%, isn't it?
That's up there. Yeah.
Something
there's
like
another reason people don't like stouts though is you have to acquire the taste. I mean,
It's a rich flavor.
It's a rich flavor. It's strong on there, and I've had the advantage that when I first tried it, I didn't really particularly care for it.
Yeah.
But I went to Ireland and got stuck with it because it's the only beer you can drink there. Mm-hmm. And by the time you come back, gosh, you get a craving for it. You got to have it.
Oh yeah.
And you acquire the taste for it. That's when you really begin to appreciate what you can do with it.
I do have a comment here.
This is like Folgers in your cup.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do want to talk. Yeah, I do.
It's very good.
It's like
very
coffee.
good for a coffee stout.
Yeah, I was just So I want to get back to Murmur's musing. I want to get back to his or her comment. I don't know who Murmur be.
Yeah.
And if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize.
Yeah.
It's a unique name. But yes, this to me is a very bright. It's not a very creamy. Like Guinness would be a creamy stout. This is more of a bright stout. I would say it's almost like a cold brew coffee.
Yeah.
But a beer.
Yeah, no, it's.
I think you're on target on there.
If you don't like coffee, don't drink this one because this tastes exactly like a iced coffee.
Yeah.
The nice thing though is it doesn't have that acidic hit
Absolutely.
that you would get from like
Which a lot
flat black coffee.
Well, and I think a lot of cold brew coffees like that. I think that's the
that might be the
purpose
trend on that. I've taken Pint 9 has a comparable coffee stout that I like.
That's actually where we're going. So Murmur's amusing. He said the Oso Cafe, and I've got
Oso Cafe. I love that beer.
Yep, and I've got a story on that one actually. So I went down to meet the fine people down at Pint 9. Which if you have not been down there, they're right next to Cross Train. It's literally next door.
Sweet
Cross Train
place.
and Pint 9. Down in La Vista, if you take the Portal Road from Omaha going down to
Portal Road. I love it.
Yeah, down
Go to the third dimension.
yeah, exactly,
Turn right.
Yeah. It's like
The beer alley is what it is.
Look for the blue circle. You end up at the red circle. It's the portal.
Right.
But anyway,
Ooh, take the blue pill and the red pill.
Yeah. But anyway, it's on its way down to Papillion. Just look it up. You'll find it. Anyway, I was down there just chatting with him and mentioned the podcast and all that, and he said, "Do you want to tour?"
Aren't they on Papio Creek? Isn't like Papio Creek in their backyard?
It's in that
gotta be
area.
close. Yeah, it's
It's gotta be real close.
Yeah.
So you can take the Papio and you just ride your bike down there.
Pull the kayak out of the
and get eaten by the mountain lion that's in the area.
Right.
So he gives. Anyway, we grab a beer and we head back, and I'm taking pictures and asking him a lot of questions, and it was a lot of fun. They're super personable there. But we get next to the Bright tank here, and he's like, "Oh, and this is a new thing that we're working on." And he's like, "Do you like coffee beer?" I said, "You know what?" I said, "I love coffee, and I love beer, and I have had some horrible coffee beers, and
Sure.
I have had some good coffee beers. I've never had a great coffee beer." And he said, "It all depends on the coffee that you're using."
The bean.
Exactly.
Right.
And so what he did was, we had finished our beers, and he took mine, rinsed it out, and he pulled it right off the Bright tank. He said, "Drink this." And it was Oso Cafe.
Right.
Yep. And it wasn't carbonated, so it was flat. But the flavor profile, I was like, "Oh my, this is
that thing
delicious."
that is
A little chill down
great
back there.
stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is like and I'm not a cream in my coffee. I'm a black coffee, so I like this. This is
Okay.
like a black.
Yeah, this is nice.
A black
I mean, like I
cold
said,
brew
it
coffee.
smells like a
is.
Folgers
It is.
coffee.
Yeah, the Oso Cafe is like a creamed coffee.
Exactly.
And it is fantastic.
You hit that right on the mark. The nice thing about Pint 9, the brewer really has a sense of what he wants to do with the ingredients is on there.
Mhm.
And I find many of the beers there are very good, but this one that one is spot on. It's something that you really need to trek down and go try and beg Dave to put it on Casual Pint.
He'll get there. He'll get there.
He will.
All right. So, since we're going to get back into the talk, we're getting some requests here
Yeah.
because Ray's not talking enough. So,
Yeah. Get the vet talking over there.
we need you to talk about your time at Old Spice.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Wake him up a little bit.
There
I
you
think
go.
we get an odor of a story here.
Oh yeah, it's quite a smelly story. It was one of my summer jobs while I was in college, and the company was called American Cyanamid, and that was a pharmaceutical company, and their division was called Schultons was the name of the company that actually made Old Spice, and they would hire out to college kids during the summer while a lot of the union labor went on summer vacations. So the upside is we got paid union wages as college kids.
Wow, that's
And-
good pay then.
Yeah,
Way too good.
And we actually joined we joined the union. And the way it kind of worked was you joined the union, and then you're on a 90-day kind of
Trial
probation.
period.
Yeah, probation. So they hired you for 89 days, and then on the 90th day they fired you, so you don't have to start paying union dues.
Oh, gee whiz. That sounds typical management.
So, I worked in the factory, and the name of the large machine which filled the Old Spice bottles was called Elsie.
Now, is this Old Spice deodorant or Old Spice spray? What?
It was the classic. The reason it was called Elsie because it filled those little white bottles of Old Spice. If you remember, they used to look like little white milk bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what it was called, Elsie.
Elsie the cow.
Yep, and literally the way they filled it was this little
Cologne.
Yes, cologne.
Clone, yes.
And what they would do is the bottle would come down the line, and the way the bottle got filled up was it looked like a teat. This probe would go right into the bottle, and it had 4 slits in it, and it'd fire the product out along the side wall.
Oh, that 4 teats. You're talking about a cow there. That's why they got.
And the bottles, when they hit that part of the station, would spin about. I would say they could run about 300 bottles a minute through this spinner and fill up that many bottles in a
300
minute.
minute?
300 per minute. I mean, this thing was.
Brian had a ship, and it was called the Baton, and they had a thing called the Sea Whiz, and it could shoot 60 rounds a second.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about 300 a minute. That's pretty fast.
Oh yeah, this thing.
That's pretty darn fast.
This thing came around as a blur.
Yeah.
And one day they switched out the line. Now the bottles, they also made what they called a lime stick deodorant, and they started making a lime stick cologne. And this smelled awful. I mean, it was like literally, it was like having. It was kind of like. I don't know, Mountain Dew on a stick.
This is worse than the time the raccoon got stuck in the copy machine. Is that kind of one of those moves? Odeon's
Sex
Delight?
Panther.
Yeah.
Sex Panther, that's what it was.
Oh man.
The vacuum cleaner soaks up the deodorant and
It was
throws it in the
terrible.
room.
Well, it was even worse than that because what happened was the bottles that they used were the same shape, but the gauge of the glass was thinner. So when the teat came down, it was not calibrated for this thinner.
Just crushed
And it just started crushing them and spewing this stuff. I mean, no, it was like pop, pop, pop. It was like pop, 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 pop,
like
pop, pop.
whack-a-mole
And
times
bef-
1,000.
And and they shut the line down about 15, 20 seconds after it started happening.
But in
So,
15, 20 seconds, there's
Damage
hundreds
was
of
there
bottles.
was like 4 or 5 gallons of this stuff all over the floor.
Oh, man.
And, no air conditioning. So it's 125 degrees.
Can you, day off, see you
No,
later.
no.
Get the mop.
No. It was
Not
worse
back
than
then.
that
Yeah.
because we were union labor. We were technically union labor. We had to sit at our station for 8 hours while they fixed it and cleaned it. And we were not allowed. The only time we were allowed to move off our station was during our breaks and lunch.
yeah,
Oh,
your
what a
nostrils
weird
were
thing.
cleared out pretty good.
And it was probably the worst working day of
Oh.
one of my worst working
Can't I
days.
spend this in the food room, whatever
No.
they call it, the
Hey,
galley,
break room.
Hey,
the
Nope.
break room. Thank
Nope. We had to sit there, and we had
Galley.
we,
Well, that'd be the ship, the galley.
yeah, the galley. But we had to sit there until they cleaned up Elsie, and actually, it happened within the first hour.
And you guys named it Elsie.
And we named it Elsie, and Elsie kind of crapped all over the floor, and we sat there for 7 hours.
That is hilarious. That reminds me of the time that I had a chance to part-time job working at a shampoo factory. And like everyone went to the break room to smoke
This is
cigarettes.
really good.
And if you didn't want to be inundated in tobacco,
Mm-hmm.
you would go outdoors. But like you couldn't get relief because the shampoo is everywhere. You go home at night and it's like you're pulling it out of your nostrils.
Oh, gross.
So I
Just
can just imagine what
permeating
you're going with
everything.
Old Spice. That must have been horrible.
Yeah, it wasn't even the regular Old Spice. It was
you didn't
just-
buy it because it was just on you.
yeah, you just got sprayed with it.
Right,
It was
you
like,
always smell good. It's amazing.
I never take showers.
I'm sanitized on the way out.
Exactly.
So I'm sure Karen decided that she wanted me to tell that story.
That's a good story, though. I like it.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
That's right. That's right. I held a top secret clearance. You won't have to shoot me.
All right.
All
Military
right.
code there.
Yeah. Next thing that I wanted to talk about. So this one actually, my wife actually showed me this article and kind of perturbed me, and it's still ongoing. So I don't.
Perturbed. That's a good word.
It doesn't get enough usage, so I'm gonna bring it. I'm bringing it back. I can't bring sexy back, so I'm just bringing.
Oh,
perturbed
there
back.
you go.
Yeah, I'm too
I'd like to go
clean-shaven
see
for
him,
that.
though.
Exactly.
Isn't he here in November?
I don't know.
The little
maybe.
JT concert? Maybe it's December. Anyway, he's coming to town.
I would love to do that.
I
That'd be
would,
awesome.
yeah. $300 for the nosebleeds.
So, back when I was in the military, and I had made reference to this earlier in the talk, I had my roommate and my best friend were both on the USS Cole, DDG 67 as a destroyer.
Yep.
Determined warrior. You met Dave.
Well, those
Yeah.
that don't know, it
Yeah.
got blown up.
Yep, back in Yemen, and
Yeah.
that was
remember.
actually October 12th, 2000. So it kind of got.
Hey, Dave. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. I think he's,
Good friend of ours.
Yeah, I think he's
That was
living down
on-
in Texas now.
Yeah,
so.
we're Facebook friends.
Yeah.
I see his
Andy's
posts and
out
like
in,
it.
Yeah.
Like button.
But no, they this is back in 2000, and there's some cool shots. Like I love this one. I don't know if Ray can see it. But the
Oop.
shot here
Boop.
with the hole in the side of the ship. and
Oh,
it's
it was
steaming.
horrible.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, I
that
remember
was
that.
mentioned.
But this shot here
Can you
that
turn
I have,
your thing around? Let me,
yeah,
you know.
I'll show it here in a second, but I want to explain it before I show it. So,
Sure.
the shot that I have is the hole in the side of the ship, but it's steaming under its own power in the water, like it's going under its with the hole in the side of the ship.
Right.
And
Right.
that to me, because the nickname of that ship, even before this whole thing happened, was Determined Warrior,
I don't know.
and that's. I
Did
mean,
you send that picture to me?
I did not.
No. All right. You should have done
just-
that.
just on
I
my
would have put
notes.
it up there.
No, just on my notes.
You'll have to ask me about the Hunley.
We'll get there. All right. Yeah. Remind me of that here.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
about
right. So, so this article that she showed me was USS Cole survivors versus Sudan, and there is an ongoing lawsuit. And like I said, I don't have all the facts because it's ongoing. Excuse me, but there is a.
When did this happen?
This happened Wednesday,
Oh, okay. Oh,
which again the USS Cole itself.
thought
got-
you were talking about the investigation of the call.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that was years ago. It's still going.
no,
Can't they shut the book on that one?
No, the USS Cole itself, the bombing of it in 2000 got overshadowed by September 11th, which is why I don't know that a lot of people know about it because it got overshadowed. And the USS Cole survivors versus Wednesday, which is when the mass shooting happened. So again, it got overshadowed, which kind of sucks. So, unfortunately for them, here's the gist of it. The survivors of the USS Cole, the families and the people that were actually on the ship, there's an ongoing lawsuit for $315 million against the country of Sudan, because Sudan was the one that actually financed the attack on USS Cole. On Wednesday,
This sounds really tricky already.
yeah, on
Good
Wednesday,
thing I'm not a lawyer.
yeah. Well, here's where it gets really tricky. So on Wednesday, the Trump administration actually sided with Sudan because of a legal loophole.
This is what you were talking about earlier.
Yep.
Gotcha.
There was a legal loophole. So what happened was They sent the I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the terminology of it, but there was the hey, we're suing you letter, basically. And they sent it to the embassy of Sudan, because that's here. I mean, that's kind of first line of communication. Well, legally, they're supposed to send it to the foreign ministry in the capital of Sudan. If you know what's going on in Sudan, there's not a lot of...
There's nothing there to send it to.
Right. So they sent it to the embassy of Sudan. Well, the lawyers for Sudan argued that, and they knew about the lawsuit. They've known about the lawsuit, and they've shown up. They didn't show up until the money thing happened.
Follow the money.
Pretty much.
Follow the oil.
So, but when they showed up, they argued that, we weren't given proper notification, and then the Trump administration actually sided with Sudan. And if you know anything about Sudan, it is actually a state-sponsored terrorist country. I mean, they
it's on the
terrorism.
list.
Yeah, it's on the list. So that's
yeah.
We don't get
It's faux pas. There's some faux pas going on
yeah,
there.
and like I said, I don't know all the facts on it, but on the surface, this looks really bad.
There's one problem when you have lawyers involved on there and the suit's that big on there, because let me just I've had so much problems with seeing issues like this come about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I
experience, but what
sides.
happens?
There's legal.
No. There's not two-sided. It's just that the problem is you can't figure out where the money is actually going to go. You get $350 million. Let's say that suit goes through.
Mm-hmm.
The families may only get $315,000, depending on the rest, depending on how, and what the motives are behind the lawyers are doing. I don't care about the Trump administration, but I really think the whole family should be able to carry that suit forward on it. So it'll be very interesting to see if it breaks out that way.
Right.
Because they may be saying, well, for foreign relations issues, we need to do it this way, but for the best interest of families, we should go another way. And that's...
Foreign relations with Sudan, a state sponsor of terror?
For example, if we bomb Sudan, how do they pay for it? I mean, does Sudan have the means to pay $315 million? That's the question.
We buy the country because it's not even worth $315
Right, that's the question. You may as well give the entire country over to the survivors of the coal.
Well, and when we bomb countries, we tend to pay for the rebuilding of that country. That's just kind of the way we are.
Yeah.
So you maybe
sorry,
the question
Hiroshima,
is
we're going to rebuild.
That's right. Well, isn't Sudan? Isn't there an issue with a civil war in Sudan? I think there are rebels in the
correct.
And that's why they didn't. Maybe that's why the lawyers for the USS Cole survivors didn't send it directly to Sudan and send it to the embassy, because the embassy has probably other means of communication with the capital. I don't know.
Let me complicate the question.
Excellent.
Let me complicate the question.
Deeper.
How does anyone plan to get $315 million from a pit hole in the planet from Sudan? I don't know how. I don't know what the motive behind the lawyers on that would be. I mean, if I was a lawyer, I'd much rather sue Trump and get $315. Because you'd win the case on that, where I don't know how you win on Sudan.
Yeah, you would think $315 million when you're talking about suing a country.
Well, that's
government.
and that's the other thing too. I mean, where is the, shall I say, the jurisdiction?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, where are they? Typically $315 million means that it's a civil penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the jurisdiction for you were wrong? I mean, which court?
Well, they've found that they were the ones that actually financed the attack.
Right, but which court do you? But we're okay. They're the ones that.
Right. Is it a?
But then are they subject to American law in America? Do they go to court for, a civil court in America?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not American citizens. It's a foreign entity.
Kind of like Saudi Arabia. The victims of 9/11 being able to sue. Or the families of the victims of 9/11.
But see the difference.
I just looked up Sudan, the economy of Sudan, and all that stuff, and the GDP and the growth and all that stuff. They're worth $186 billion. So I mean, there is some money over there.
Well, there are oil.
It's a question what they're suing. But see, Saudi Arabia, you can sue them easily because they have so many corporate connections to the United States and other Western civilizations. That may be true with Sudan. Maybe that's what the lawyers are looking at, and that's maybe really problematic. And in which case, I would see a good reason to do it. But I have to question it because it's kind of like trying to dig a gold coin out of the middle of cement, and it's only a penny. That's why I wonder why. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Like
There's
I said,
not enough facts.
this is new. It's developing. I don't know the whole, and I've only seen just a couple articles on this. There's not a lot of.
I'll keep an eye on that one.
Yeah,
Achoo.
and like I
Excuse
said, it's for me, it's a very personal subject.
There's there's no doubt. If I had any connection to that, you'd think that Sudan would just pay up and say, "Hey, we don't want to deal with a civil suit on it. Here's we'll give you $200 million to just make it go away." But if you don't have an operating government, how does that work?
True, that is true. Yep, but if it's worth
$86 billion,
where's that?
back up
I'd like to find out what companies are making that money in
Exactly.
Sudan.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's our GDP.
Well, you could sue a company easier. You can get the companies actually to cough up the money easier than suing the country. I bet.
The government, yeah.
You could say if company X, Y, and Z funded this part with sided with the government, and then say, okay, well, great, we'll put sanctions on your company. You can't do any business in the United States unless you cough up $200 million for these survivors. The families are. That's where you need someone that really knows how to negotiate instead of a lawyer that just wants to feed their own pocket.
Yeah. Even if the judgment were to stand, how do you collect that from Sudan?
Right. You can
who
collect
has-
it from a company.
Who has the jurisdiction to make that judgment?
Absolutely. Is it the UN?
Well, see,
Are they part of the UN?
But
I don't know.
But
Are
if
they Sudan? Is it?
if you're a company though, you don't care
How are
about
they
who
a
has
state sponsor of terror and part of the UN.
because the United Nations is not part of the United States, really.
I know.
That's a sad part. That's one of the things that I've been arguing about for a long time.
Well,
I think a lot of people.
Iran is.
Well, yeah, and it's an OPEC nation also. So,
Ow.
Yeah.
I mean,
a
I don't
mess.
want to switch subjects, but I want to switch subjects.
thank you, Britt. Thank
That
you.
sounds good.
Ray, you've got this interesting block of wood that I've been staring at, and you didn't say nothing about it over here. So
Well-
I'm sure there's a story behind it.
Well, I wanted to, in case we needed to fill some time.
Well, here's the time
Here's
filler
the
right
time.
here.
Um,
You want to hold that up to the camera?
Sure.
Just a little.
and
Yeah, there you go. Boom. I'm gonna zoom that in.
I'll
Whoop.
zoom in on it.
There
But
you go.
it's
Got this
it's a memento from my last duty assignment down in
tilted up a little bit towards the
let's-
camera.
like this.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Boom. Yeah,
But
the
it
light was kind of hitting it
Okay.
wrong. But yeah,
But-
you got this block of wood, and it's got a bunch of gold
Right, and it was a memento from my
plaques around it.
right. It was a memento from my last duty station, and
You said duty.
my duty station,
Yes, your duty.
and at Air Force Global Weather Central, and
Want to take a look at that?
yeah, I'd like to read real quick. I'll
Oh
let
yeah,
you show
read
me.
it. Read it.
But I want to read the it's called the brick,
Yeah,
and
it
this
looks
is-
like a brick.
and it's a traditional.
wood.
It's one of the traditional
Yes.
mementos you get when you worked on off at Air Force Base, especially at the old Global Weather
It's a
Central.
fresh maker.
And it says a brick from the past. This wooden brick is from the floor of the Martin Bomber plant,
Wow.
Omaha, Fort Crook, Nebraska.
Mm.
This plant was built in 1941 and was designed for the manufacture of aircraft to support the United States World War II effort. All 1,585 B-26s and B-29s were produced in this plant.
In Nebraska.
Yes, at Offutt Building D,
Nice.
Is this the Enola Gay? Was it that?
including the Enola Gay and the
Awesome.
boxcar.
Yep.
The purpose of the wooden floor was to eliminate static electricity,
Oh, nice.
and
That's part of the wood floor.
and that is part of the wood
Which is
floor.
very
that is
interesting.
so cool.
That's
I
a
would-
nice part.
Yeah,
That is actually something I didn't.
I
like.
got you.
It makes
Yeah.
sense because wood isn't conductive.
right.
That is super interesting.
And when they renovated the building, there was a master sergeant. I believe he was working at Global.
That's some good wood
Yeah.
right there.
Thanks for
And-
sharing this, Ray.
And he had the foresight that I think someone just told me he literally went out to the dumpsters, and as they were tearing the blocks out to renovate the Martin Bomber plant, he was pulling them out of the dumpsters. He brought them home. He heat treated them to get the creosote and all the oils
Sure.
out of
it.
the plant, and then he started selling those.
Smart man.
And then,
Yeah.
so I don't know how much it cost. It couldn't. It was probably a nominal fee back to the Air Force folks because, by regulation, I think back then you could only spend about $25 on something like this as a going away gift or a memento for somebody served there. And then my staff had all the one side's the Air Weather Service symbol, the other side I'm not sure what the other side I can't remember.
It's amazing what you'd find in a dumpster.
Yep.
Our first studio, just right behind us at the bar.
Mm-hmm.
If you see, the bar is actually covered in carpet. Essentially, underneath it has a piece of plastic. So if something is spilled, it doesn't go through. And then there's carpet on the top of it. Well, the company went out of business, and so Nebraska Furniture Mart, I used to work for them at the time, just threw them all in a dumpster. And I'm like, what are you doing with all these carpet samples? They're like, we can't sell them anymore. And I'm like, can I just take those home? And they're great. They're just little 2x2 squares. But I've got them at the back door. I got them on the bar. I got they're just cheap, cheap carpet that was found in a dumpster. It's amazing what you can find.
I gotta say, I am.
That's amazing that he turned something like that into that.
I am blown away that the floor of the manufacturing plant, and if you know the size of a B-29.
Oh, I do.
I mean, so for those of you that don't know what the Enola Gay is, and that is one of the B-29s that rolled over this literal piece of wood. The Enola Gay was the one that actually dropped one of the bombs.
Yes, Hiroshima.
Nuclear bombs.
Yeah, the nuclear bomb. Thank you. The nuclear bomb on Hiroshima. And that was actually produced here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is
way cool.
I am blown away by this. This is super cool.
Smart man to make them.
Yeah. But it just, the fact that the floor was made of wood. Yeah, I mean, you get that in a house, but not a manufacturing plant. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
And it's tongue in your house, it's tongue and groove. Here, it's literally a 8-sided brick.
Yeah.
It reminds me.
Cool.
It reminds me of Hugh Hefner when he built the big ship for the big airplane that was
Spruce
made
Goose.
Spruce Goose made out of wood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
You're telling me that he didn't cut those down? That's the shape of what
That
was
is
in
the
there?
shape. Yeah, that's the basic shape of the brick.
Oh, so it was just laid out in bricks. So there
Like
would have been little tiny holes,
like
essentially.
cobblestone.
Yeah,
right?
it'd be kind of like a cobblestone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were. I could not.
There may have been a key piece there.
Yeah,
Or
there may
he
have
may
been a
have-
key piece, or they may have actually been, truly, what do you call it? Truly rectangular, and then he could have beveled them out in order to make it look
Cleaner and nicer.
cleaner
Yeah.
and polished. Yep.
Interesting.
That's super cool.
There you go.
Nice
I mean,
memento.
there kills 10 minutes right there. Nice.
You got to fill that in, and Ray got to talk.
Exactly. We get stuck. Another cool story.
Speaking of that, I think we might need to slip into our last drink.
Da, da, da.
That's what I'm thinking.
Perfect. All right, so the last one. Of the night,
the last one of the night.
the 60-minute.
That is right. I will throw the Casual Pint logo up there.
This is from Dogfish Head.
It is.
Da da.
Let's
Casual
talk about
Pint.
it some more.
Very strong brewery company.
Go get your beers there.
Very
Casual Pint.
good craft beer.
And they have actually done several tap takeovers in recently here in the last couple months here in Omaha.
Dogfish Head is
There's
the type
great
of
beer.
I've been trying to get their beers for at least over a decade on it because they really do a lot.
And they're from the
interesting
East
beers.
Coast.
Yes.
I do a lot. We couldn't get this here in Nebraska for those that are not familiar. It's hard to get hold of these people. They've done serious craft beer, a lot of them on there, and they get highly rated on it. And then trying to get a hold of them has been very difficult. Now that it's here in Nebraska, it's kind of like a prized beer.
Now,
Take
see,
that
having
last
grown
sip
up
of it.
on the East Coast, I drank a lot of Dogfish along with a lot of Yingling.
Yes, Ray.
And this is the
Ray, that's why we're here to envy you.
and this is the 60-minute, and there's the
60, 75,
90,
90, 120.
And the 61.
Oh, yeah, the 61. That's right. I forgot about that. Which the 61 is completely different than the 60, for sure.
More like a sour with the Syrah must in there.
Yep.
Thank you.
But yeah. Here's to
I'll remember to clink this time.
here's to the 60 minutes, right? Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
A lot.
Cheers.
Oh, yeah, back to the IPA.
Yep.
back to the good taste.
And this is a good IPA.
It is. I didn't want to. I for our last beer, I didn't want to go overpowering.
You got to be careful with IPAs when you're sampling many different beers because IPAs can tend to be palate wreckers.
Yeah.
Because of the hops. So,
But that coffee one was amazing.
Yes,
that,
it was.
Yeah, the coffee one was very good.
very happy with that one. That was a good life choice.
Yeah, it
on
was.
that
Nice,
coffee. But
nice
this-
job, David.
Yeah,
nice
this-
job picking that one out.
Yeah, this is a good, bright 60-minute IPA. I like.
It seems to be like a West Coast IPA.
There's not really a lot of aroma to it. I'm not getting a
No.
lot.
But it hits the back of your tongue, like on
Mhm.
on either side. It hits the back of your taste buds.
Clear. It's pretty darn clear.
Dogfish Head is a great brewery.
They really do solid set of beers on there.
This is
The
good.
Dogfish Head did one. What was it called? I think it starts with a T. Anyway, it was like
that one.
that one. It wasn't a minute session IPA. It was it would almost be ranked right up there with like a Chardonnay. And
Was it a sour beer?
That
No.
wasn't one.
Well, it
that
was-
wasn't their stout beer that they put out. That
No.
cherry stout type thing. Or
I'll
was
look it up. But
Are there sea quench?
They put out.
Mm.
For those that don't know, they put out some beers out there that actually would cost $20 for a 6-pack.
I dropped my phone.
So
You're not supposed to be looking things up on the podcast either, Brad.
Dogfish Head. It's all right. I'll do it.
Breaking with tradition here. Yeah, no, this is a good beer. Easy drinkability on this one.
yes, this is a beer that you can have 2 or 3 of them on a weekend on there and be happy with it.
If you like IPAs, doesn't
Even for someone that's not an IPA drinker on it, if
It's
they
not
like
o-
a little bit of hops on it
Mhm.
and they can tolerate it, it's tolerable. It's not.
right.
It's not. It's
overly
not
bitter.
an overpowering IPA.
Not at all.
One of the nice things about the microbrewing business, with all these craft beers coming out and all these microbrewers coming in place, is we got away from the real strict standards on an IPA because the original IPA recipe kicks you in the teeth,
Which-
kicks you in the face.
I like
kicks you
that
in the
every once in a
tongue.
while, but like if I'm drinking all day, probably not gonna.
You probably only have
Yeah.
one or
Yeah.
two, depending
Absolutely.
on the situation, and you'll sip it.
Mhm.
The lighter IPAs they've come up out of the years are fantastic. I mean, the range that we've done with IPAs.
Well, like the all day IPA. I mean,
the
that's
all-day IPA, yeah.
that's a really
And
good
not
one.
and Infusion did the South Pacific IPA, juicer on it, and some of these other places done
Mhm.
some of them, and they're very tasty, and they're very accessible, and compared to the original IPAs, which, geez, you really have to be a hophead to like
Oh,
them.
you really do. The Brett, you're.
Oh, sorry about that.
One of my favorites now is Tommy Knocker. They have a blood orange IPA.
Ooh, that's
and
good.
I'm a big fan of citrus.
Okay.
It's a very juicy IPA.
Citrus is one of the few fruits you can do in beer and do it well.
Absolutely.
I want to get back to Dogfish Head. What we're drinking on. It's called the Midas Touch. If you guys
Midas,
have,
that's
Trust
one's
the
great.
Midas touch.
yeah, if you haven't had that, the way they pronounce it, it's a beer, wine, mead, hydrated 2,700 years in the making. It says 2,700-year-old drinking vessel from the tomb of the King Midas. It is. It's the wine of beers. The
This-
beers of wine of beer. I might be saying that wrong, but it's like a Chardonnay, but it's like a sour, but it's like an IPA. It's really interesting.
This type of beer goes good with chicken or fish on it.
Mhm.
If you have anything in that range marking, that beer does really great in that area.
I had one last Saturday, and not a week ago, or not yesterday, but a week ago. It was really good. It was really good. Thank you, Andrew. By the way,
Yeah. One of the things. This is the last topic that I wanted to bring up. I know you want to talk about the Civil War. We'll
That's
get into that.
you don't have to. It's
No,
up
no,
to
we
you.
can-
You can just
absolutely.
invite me back another time.
we're talking about war. Let's talk about it.
This just happened. This was another veteran. So Saturday Night Live did a bit.
Oh yes,
Not yesterday, but last Saturday.
the man that has the patched eye.
Yes,
patch eye syndrome.
Yes, Congressman Dan Crenshaw from Texas. He is a former Navy SEAL, Lieutenant Commander, Navy SEAL, and has done 4 tours over in the Middle East. On his 3rd tour, he lost his eye and actually went back for a 4th and has a patch over his eye.
Thank you.
Running for a House seat there in Texas.
He got elected.
Yeah,
Sure
get
did.
elected. Yep. But Saturday Night Live
And went back on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's,
Last Saturday.
Well, let's talk about the first one though. But
Yeah.
so Pete Davidson is one of the comedians there, and those of you that don't know Saturday Night Live may know Ariana Grande. That was her fiance, and wasn't a very funny bit, and kind of tore him down a little bit, and was a little rude. But it wasn't like terrible. But it wasn't.
They were trying to
it
be
just
Saturday
wasn't
Night
funny.
Live.
It just wasn't funny.
Yeah, it wasn't funny at all. And Dan Crenshaw did not take any offense to it. Was not looking for any apology. But did say that it was in poor taste. And there was a huge backlash.
You want to make fun of me? Let me know,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll okay it.
So there was a huge backlash though against Saturday Night Live, and they issued an apology
As they should.
just this last Saturday. And if you have not watched it, I would actually implore you to look it up and watch it. They went above and beyond in their apology. They not only did a really good, heartfelt apology, they brought him onto the program and apologized to his face, and then had him do the same bit, but against the comedian from Saturday Night Live.
Nice. Perfect.
So
See here,
Those who have Cox Cable can go on demand and find this.
you can
it
actually
out.
find that on YouTube. On
You can.
CRTV
Yeah,
you can
or
too,
something.
yeah.
You can.
But what I thought was great about Dan doing that is he took this outrage machine, which I don't care.
easy to do.
You
Yeah.
know this outrage machine, whether it doesn't matter where it's coming from now. There's this outrage machine. Everyone's got to be upset about this.
Right.
They took it and just de-escalated the whole situation on there and said, this is what comedy's about. We're trying to poke fun at it. We're trying to roast each
Absolutely.
other. This
Yeah.
is what it's supposed to be about. And unfortunately, I still think there's an audience out there that just wants this outrage to continue and just push all that stuff. But the way Dan just did this and comes back on there and just pokes it back, and they poke back fun at each other, they're the insiders. They know the game of what comedy is supposed to be about now, and they've explained that.
Yep.
But how many people are smart enough to figure that out?
Well,
You know there's an outrage out there. We could sit here and
Well,
scream about
in
something
this,
on there.
in this political climate, there's no disagreeing anymore. It's just
There
it's
is none.
outrage on it's. We are at a fever pitch on both sides, and there's no hey.
Hey, I identify as a reptile. Where's my bathroom? Yeah. it's going to be that point.
Not even necessarily that. I mean, if you express an opinion, you're not only wrong, you're a moron for even thinking that.
I've
I mean, that's just
already
where it's come
experienced
to.
this situation where people drop the F-bomb on me just because I want to open up a conversation on something.
Yeah.
And the point is now people are so outraged and get so easily upset on it. It says, excuse me, you got to get out of your group think mentality and start realizing there's a bigger world out there.
We-
And people
Open your
can't go
eyes.
there.
We are all individuals, and we have individual opinions, and
Right.
we're not always going to agree, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
That's the whole point of fighting for freedom.
absolutely. We all have differing opinions. Some are good, some are not good, but we can all agree
That's
to
what we're
disagree.
supposed to debate about.
Exactly.
And that's why we have a talk show.
That's
Yeah.
right. And that's why we're not Facebook, because we don't want to get F-bombed when we
Well,
have
technically, we are Facebook Live right now.
we
so.
are Facebook Live.
I do want to say though, and you've all seen the Saturday Night Live bit, or you've all seen Dan Crenshaw, the picture of him. So now that I know that he's not easily offended, I will say that I will be highly disappointed because of his career in the military as a Navy SEAL and now as a congressman. If he does not come out with an Avengers team, I will be highly disappointed because he does look a little like Nick Fury. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just
Oh, yeah.
Outrage.
Turn that to the camera, Brian.
I think it's interesting how times
He
have
does.
changed
Totally looks like
because
him.
we had Bob Kerrey as governor, and he was a Vietnam veteran and had lost his leg, and when he ran for governor on it, he was the best thing possible on there. And then times change on it, and people lose the fact of what military people go through, and the outrage machine is out there, and people want to say, well, you got to do this, you got to do that, and pushes people in the corners, and then they can't escape those corners anymore.
absolutely. absolutely. Can't we all just get along?
Brian, you had me put some slides together.
Oh.
Didn't we have?
You
did.
got slides.
Maybe.
So-
I think I need to put.
Oh, maybe I didn't have them on there. Maybe,
Well, I
maybe
did.
I totally
yeah,
forgot
I
to
did.
put them on there.
Yeah, so I did
That's my bad.
send him some. Not a big deal.
I didn't put them on there.
Yeah. Well, for Veterans Day, and for every major holiday, our street in the neighborhood that I live in, there's actually two main streets, but we do the Avenue of Flags. And
Which was
almost
cool.
Yeah, I would say 90 to 95%
I
of the
downloaded
houses.
the picture. I just didn't put it on
Yeah.
the PowerPoint
Uh-oh.
slides.
They participate in this, and every house has at least one flag. There's some with two flags, but it's a really cool sight. And I sent Brent some pictures of both the whole street and both the and my driveway where the flag is. It's pretty cool. So
I mean, I guess I could just pull them up.
maybe just we're gonna do this on the fly.
I guess libraries, pictures.
Just show all the pictures.
There it is. Boom.
If it decides to come up.
There it is. Boom.
Yay!
Look,
Yeah.
flags down the street. Flag, flag, flag.
Yeah.
Flag, flag.
Yep.
So
Yeah. There at the very end, there's one that's missing, but not a big deal. We'll talk to them. We'll have a talk with that guy.
There will be a
Hey,
the
have me
neighborhood
download
committee
something
will
else.
talk to them.
Yeah, the homeowners association will be knocking at their door.
Oh, what was this all about?
Oh yeah, so this was from my daughter's class. They were writing. The class wrote letters to veterans, and these. There's 4 of them there, but 3 of them are from my oldest daughter's friends, and they asked if they could write letters to me specifically.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Veterans
thank
Day.
you for
That's nice.
services.
Yeah,
Nice.
super cool. Yeah.
And Brian deserves it.
Oh, thanks. As the most well-known veteran.
No
Sorry.
taking down on Ray.
No, he's the most famous veteran since Elvis Presley.
Yes, since he went home. Yes. All right. Well, I think we're kind of winding down on the talk
Yeah.
here, and I want to thank you guys for coming on. It's been a pleasure
Thanks for
talking with you guys.
Thanks for the invite, Brian.
Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure having
Yeah.
being here.
Well, and we will never forget. So
Yes. We'll
Never forget.
Yep. So
Always remember.
is there any last minute comments? Are we good?
We're good.
We're good?
You want to come back to the Civil War? We'll come back to that another
Yeah.
time.
That might be. I think it's talking itself.
Well,
actually.
Yeah, the only reason I
Yeah,
mentioned to you in the email on that is that's a subject I've been studying for about the last 2 years because there's been so much controversy on the left and the right, and they don't know what the war was about or how economics played into it.
Well, I think we don't.
And I'm wearing
It
the
takes-
Hunley shirt on here, the submarine that took down the first ship.
Nice. Yeah, well, I think that deserves its own talk.
It does.
Yeah, it's a very complex, intricate talk,
don't wanna
and
do that,
we
we
could
could do
spend a lot of
something
time.
else.
Well, we could spend some time on that one. Well, today we have been talking on Veterans Day because it is.
It is
technically
that day.
Yes, it is actually Veterans Day. Tomorrow is the observed, but
Yeah, a buddy of mine was at the Hive, and he was like, "So explain this to me. Is anything open tomorrow?" And I'm like, well,
I want my
Veterans Day is
mail. Can I get my
today.
mail?
Yeah, Veterans Day is today,
No mail tomorrow.
but we honor
No
it
mail,
tomorrow.
no banking.
Yep,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Other things will be open, though.
That's
I
right.
promise
If you want to trade stock
Yeah.
market is open.
Casual Pint will be open.
there we go.
Exactly.
Go there. All right. Well, thank you guys again for joining us.
Yes, appreciate it.
Again, we've. My name's Brian.
I'm Britt.
Go ahead
My
and-
name's Andrew.
And I'm Ray.
And we've been talking on Veterans Day. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.